This is John for Arena Nexus MTG coming at you with a best of one mono green video. As a friendly reminder, if you do like these informative explorer based content, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving us a thumbs up, leaving a constructive comment down below. Now obviously Explorer is not the fully powered Pioneer format that is available in Magic Online or in paper, so a lot of the key decks in the top of the format have a lot of their pieces, but not all. For instance, Rakdos Midrange is missing cards like Dreadbore. Decks like Lotus Field are missing entire portions of their thing. And one of the other top tier decks that is missing a couple of key pieces from its toolbox is Mono Green Karn, Mono Green Devotion, the deck we are kind of taking a look at today. Obviously the big one, it's missing Nkythos Shrine to Nyx, which obviously gives it the very powerful mana engine that allows it to do very, very broken things, including the Pestilent Cauldron. Therefore, this version, without having access to that, really is not a reliable way to do the deck, but still has a lot of the other pieces that make this a good deck in the format, and still tends to have a very good Rakdos Midrange matchup. Another card you're missing is Oath of Nissa, which kind of cuts out a lot of the pieces in the deck. Like a lot of these extra ramp things you do with like Paradise Druid or the Voracious Hydras often get replaced with Oath of Nissa simply because it kind of allows you to dig for lands or other things that you're missing. Beyond that, the other card that you are missing is Sylvan Caryatid. So in that place we are playing Paradise Druid. It's not quite as good because as soon as you tap it for mana it becomes exposed to removal, whereas Sylvan Caryatid obviously has hexproof. On a positive note, this can attack and pressure, especially opposing planeswalkers against control decks and such, so there are advantages and disadvantages to both, although Caryatid is probably a little bit superior in terms of what it offers to the deck. Beyond that, obviously not playing Oath of Nissa, you can't play any of the crazy, Teferi, who sets the sun, or the 5-mana Nicol Bolas, or Vraska you probably could if you really wanted to, simply because you get access to Overgrown Tomb and the pathways, so that one's a little bit more reliable to cast, especially with Storm the Festival. So maybe we could try exploring the green-black variant, but the other two colored variants of the deck just are not possible. And the other thing, obviously, you don't have access to. You could play Pestilent Cauldron in your sideboard for the infinite mill combo, but it's just a lot harder to execute. Beyond that, what you're trying to do with the deck, you're still doing a lot of the same things. You're trying to ramp with either of the 1-mana elves into either Wolfwillow Haven and Paradise Druid, and then Kiora as kind of your final piece of ramp that you have capabilities of finding. Beyond that, you have some mid-range threats in Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns. Obviously, Cavalier allows you to mill looking for copies of Storm the Festival, also looking for your various utility lands. While you don't have access to Nykthos, you have access to different things that we'll talk about here in a minute. And obviously, the centerpiece of this deck is still Karn. Obviously, being in best of one, you don't have access to a full 15-card sideboard. Instead, you have access to a 7-card sideboard. We'll kind of talk about in a minute why we've chosen to do the ones. And then Nissa kind of is the spot that a lot of these decks have been sliding things like Vraska or Nicol Bolas or Teferi into. This is kind of your other green planeswalker. There are a couple others you could do, Vivio, Arkbow, Ranger, and a couple others, but this is one of the good ones. Storm the Festival, a lot of the main versions do play 4 ofs, but I found 3 to be quite reasonable in this list. And then as far as lands, obviously you need to play a bunch of forests to have untapped green sources for your mana dorks. Lair of the Hydra is quite a nice utility land to have access to, especially when you're getting a bunch of mana rolling with either your Nissa or something or other ways. Cascading Cataracts kind of works with our Common Wishboard, we'll talk about in a minute. Bonders Enclave, I found this one to be useful in a couple of games where maybe you have a Cavalier of Thorns or an Old Growth Troll and you're kind of top decking. This allows you to kind of draw a little bit extra. And then Castle Garenbrig, while it is not Nykthos, it does help you to power out your Cavalier of Thorns or Old Growth Trolls a little bit faster. Then Boseiju, just a powerful green utility land for its utility ability. It allows you to blow up enchantments, artifacts, or annoying lands your opponents might have. As far as the card wishboard, Tormod's Crypt and Unlicensed Hearse, very important, particularly because one of the more popular decks is Abzan Greasefang. This gives you ways to fight that particular angle of attack, while also, when you might run into Izzet decks here and there. While Phoenix isn't quite as powerful because it's missing some of the Delve spells, these are nice cards to have access to in best of one. Nyx Lotus, this is kind of a poor man's Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. You can pay for 4 mana, and then it taps for the amount of demotion equal to you have. The problem with it obviously comes into play tapped, so it is a little bit slower, but you do have things like Kiora to untap at the turn you play. Then sometimes you just use this to set up for the following turn. Golos, while I do question its relevance in the Pioneer version and the Explore version, is a little bit better because obviously you don't have access to the really absurd amounts of mana, and with a copy of Cascading Cataracts you're just able to, if you hit like 7 mana, you're able to play a bunch of spells in a turn and really get powerful things from that. Sky Sovereign, this is primarily for any creature-based matchups. I find it very good, particularly against both Mono Red and Rakdos Midrange. Rakdos Midrange, despite its power and all that, a lot of its creatures ironically have toughness 3 or less. Bone Crusher Giants, Graveyard Trespassers, Blood Tide Harvesters, etc. Meteor Golem, this is kind of your go-to answer to any particular permanent you need to blow up that isn't a land. And the Great Henge allows you to have a little bit of grind against some of the mid-range and control decks, because one of the more popular decks you will occasionally run into is Blue-White X Control, or the Blue-White Fires control decks, and you do need some way to kind of go over the top of them. As far as the power of the deck in Best of 1, I do not think it is the best deck in Best of 1. One of the weaknesses of Mono Green in the Pioneer format is the fact that it is kind of weak to aggressive decks, and those are decks you find often a lot in Best of 1. The two ones that you'll run into a lot are Mono Blue Spirits and Mono Red Aggro. I've had a reasonable time against Mono Red Aggro. Mono Blue I haven't run into much with playing this deck. Rakdos, as a deck you are going to run into in Best of 1. And this deck kind of smashes that deck, although I'm not saying you can't lose that matchup. I'm just simply saying one of the best reasons to play this deck is excellent against Rakdos, especially in Best of 1. And finally, control decks. A lot of it depends on how your draws line up, but if you can go in the mid game with a bunch of cards in your hand and you're forcing them to answer 1 for 1. I have lost to Blue Eye Control, but it was like this weird build that was running like Essence Scatter and the 2 mana Make Disappear and Test of Talents and all this other just like random counter spells. Clearly they'd been trying to tune their deck for Best of 1. They were like able to Test of Talents, the Storm the Festival, etc. So it didn't have the best showing, but this deck can fight through control decks. So that said, we're going to play a Best of 1 event and see how the deck does in Best of 1. Okay, taking a look at our first hand. Hand's fine. Not the most exciting has been on the 1 mana dork, but we do have Paradise Druid into Karn, or into Voracious Hydra, so this hand is probably fine enough. Put Lair of the Hydra out on 1. It's probably going to get Thought Seized on 1. So this is probably Greasefang combo. If it is Greasefang, I'd probably take Karn, but yep. Alright, looks like we might be up against Esper Control or something along those lines. Nope. We're up against new variant of Esper Greasefang, because we would be able to if they have a Greasefang or a copy of Can't Stay Away, we're just pretty much dead here. This is a new card that's been popping up in the Greasefang variants. Apparently I do not. So this is nice. It allows us to play the Cavalier of Thorns, which is important. Cavalier is important because it can actually block Parhelion and buy us time. And we can play Voracious Hydra to actually kill them, or to kill the cast Thoughtseize. So they have to take the Hydra if they're going to play a... whatchamacallit this turn. Which it looks like they are going to do. We could have threatened lethal with a Lair of the Hydra, but if they had like any type of removal spell, then we should just be about wrapped up here. Even if they get a boat back, they can only kill one thing and hit us for 6. So Sorin, so they're gonna get to gain some life here, which kind of sucks. Okay. Can I threaten lethal through what they have? This for fall. Can I force them to chump block here? One, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if we rip one more. Possible we were supposed to force them to have do I really realistically have access to here? We have 3 mana, so it doesn't look like we're going to be able to punish them for it. Just unfortunately not good enough. Opponent screwed up, we screwed up. We should have attacked with Lair of the Hydra, put them to the test. Attempting to grab Parhelion. Also get rid of one of their Faithless Leadings. Well, I gotta attack with the Angel and we're dead. But yeah, I think we should have attacked with Lair of the Hydra and we probably would have had the game there. Alright, taking a look at this hand. I don't think it's good enough just because we're on the draw. We don't have any of our early acceleration until we hit Kiora. And realistically, you want to be accelerating before then. This hand, once again, also has the same problem. Probably keep this hand and realistically pitch the 2 Karns. Could have kept Karn as one of our payoffs potentially, and we're going to get Thoughtseize again. It's got to take the Kiora most likely here. Well, I can take Paradise Druid, I guess. Karn once again would have been the best card to have, I suppose, but problem with Karn without Nkythos is it's really hard to leverage in the early turns. So, I'm not quite sure what our opponent has going on over there. Thought that they were on Greasefang, but this seems more like a brew. Part of his Cavalier is just going to feed the Scavenging Ooze. Taking a look at this situation, we can make a 2-3 and fight the Scavenging Ooze, and I think that's what I'm inclined to do here. Because obviously Trespasser is annoying, but it's nowhere near as threatening as a Scavenging Ooze in terms of for us to be able to deal with it. Because these can blank a 4/4 if they don't have the right removal spell. Tireless Tracker is annoying, but it's kind of whatever. next turn. These are the kind of starts that like Rakdos really needs in the matchup too, because they really need a disruption plus pressure start, and a lot of times Cavalier of Thorns is a lot easier to sure. So our opponent can threaten to kill the. Okay, I guess they can just kill the Kiora. Really nice when all your removal has mattered, huh? And Elf just ain't gonna cut it, so 0-2 so far. Alright, taking a look at this hand. This hand is much more what we want in our opener, double elf plus stuff to ramp into. So looks like our opponent's gonna kill our first dork. Yep. One awkward thing with Bonders Enclave is Old Growth Troll. Just with all the fatal pushes, sure. Okay. It's gonna grab Sky Sovereign since it's such a game breaker in this matchup. Okay, looks like we are definitely up against. So what am I pitching here? This is where not having a Tormod script gets a little bit awkward. Why is Honey's expertise decks tonight? You gonna fire up the hive and kill it? Looks like that's the play. Okay, it's got a lot of interesting cards. Cavalier gets to fire up the... Okay. Interesting. Okay. So where are they going to cast? Thoughtseize? Okay, 1, 2, 1, 5. So we can't quite threaten lethal this turn, so I may as well do this. Yep, go and grab Cascading Cataracts. Alright, and that should be game. Even with their unique take on Rakdos. This is another hand that's fairly reasonable, although if our early mana dorks get interacted with, it gets a little bit awkward. Turn 1, Thoughtseize. Face this, what, 3 different times? So that leads me to believe this Llanowar Elves is dying, probably to a Witherbloom command. Tenacious Underdog. Trespasser, sure. Another Old Growth Troll. Keeps the Trespasser from flipping. No reason to attack. Sure. Looks like it's mid-range battle versus mid-range battle at the moment. We'll just continue to establish the better board presence with Cavalier and Llanowar Elves here. So force the Graveyard Trespassers to flip back. Two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. I feel like there's a Grasp of Darkness or something going on over there. Just grab this guy Sovereign and take over the battlefield. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I don't think you have a good attack here. Yes, we just risk losing the game. Alright, and our opponent decides to scoop. Once again, we're looking at a fairly good balance of what we're looking for. 2 pieces of ramp, plus a Kiora, plus some payoff, mid-range payoffs. So, obviously depends. Are we getting Thought Seized again? Yep, getting Thought Seized again. That's what, the 4th turn 1 Thoughtseize we've played against this game? Or this event? Guess our opponent's looking at taking the payoffs. Thoughtseize bug. Okay, does our opponent have an answer for our turn 2, turn 1, turn 2 ramp play here? Yeah, Blood Chief's Thirst, whatever. Still don't know what our opponent's on. Okay, Rakdos again, it looks like. Liana on 3. Okay, if our opponent pluses, we're probably getting rid of a... Do they have Kalias to add to the party? +1, get rid of a Kiora. Okay. Fire this up for 2. Take care of Liliana. Their opponent have another Liliana. They have a Fatal here. Trigger, get a land. Trigger, draw a Karn. And our opponent scoops. Alright, take a look at this hand. Hand's a little bit more awkward because of the... We still have a turn 2 ramp spell, so I think we're still going to play it. But lead on Garenbrig into Boseiju. Mono red. Well, it's going to be a little rough. Especially being on the draw. Okay. I'll get some mana work if they really want one. With all the 1-drops. Okay, they have a Torbran or something, or Cleave or whatever. This game is just over. 2, 5. Game might just be over anyway, but not quite, but pretty much. Voracious Hydra would be a great card to draw, but you know, that's the way it rolls sometimes. So obviously not the best showing with the deck. Obviously there's a chance that we could have won the first game there against Esper Greasefang if I had attacked with Voracious Hydra and just put them to the test of having a removal spell with attacking, not with Voracious Hydra, with Lair the Hydra, and just putting them to lethal even through a Faithful Mending and, making them have like a Fatal Push or something instead of just presuming they did. We saw the strengths and the weaknesses of this deck really on display there. Even when Rakdos is disrupting us, we just kind of overpower what they do. Even just playing like a Karn on 4 into a Skyboat on 5, just fair magic. A lot of times where you just get to pound on Rakdos that way. We did something very similar to the green-black, the Golgari Rock deck that we played against. How you beat this deck with a midrange deck is much like you saw out of the Abzan deck. You disrupt, keep their mana low, removal spell, all while, pressuring them with a Tireless Tracker and a Graveyard Trespasser. And that's really how midrange decks have to attack mono green in both Explorer and Pioneer. Mono red is not the greatest of matchups. I think I have about a 50-50 thing with it right now, but the games that you play against mono red that go well are like turn 1 Mana Dork into turn 2 Old Growth Troll, and then Cavalier of Thorns, and then you kind of like stabilize the board from there. And sometimes you have to use like a Boseiju to blow up an Ember Cleave. And it really comes down to, stabilizing the board with Old Growth Troll, Cavalier of Thorns, or Voracious Hydra, and then, starting to land your Planeswalkers and kind of accruing advantage from there. Making it an endless army of 3/3s can be kind of tough for them to punch through. Karn grabbing, a Sky Sovereign, or a Great Henge can just kind of bury them in card advantage in life. A card that did pop up and is some consideration is Shadow Spear, but I really feel that if you don't have a board presence anyway, Shadow Spear is a little bit too slow, and at that point, if you're, you know, clonking in with an Old Growth Troll or a Cavalier of Thorns, they're already doing a pretty good job against them anyway. And a lot of other decks just simply, you know, like Mono Blue, don't really care about something like a Shadow Spear because you're not going to resolve your Cavalier of Thorns if their deck's doing what they're supposed to do. So, you know, one of the cards I kind of forgot to mention was Voracious Hydra just being important as a removal spell. One of the things that mono green obviously lacks is consistent creature removal, and you either have to use things like Voracious Hydra or things like Sky Sovereign and Meteor Golem. We saw those come up in some spots. But really, still the key card of the deck in a lot of situations is Karn. You know, it's a little bit different with this deck than it is in Pioneer because, you know, you don't have the huge mana sink with Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. You have to go and get a Nyx Lotus. And, you know, there's only been a couple of games that have come up where Karn into Nyx Lotus are very important. It was, I believe, against a Green-White Angels deck that we eventually went over the top of, and I cast like a 120, 121 Voracious Hydra to punch through like 80-some points of life while I'd almost milled my entire deck with Cavaliers and Goloses and stuff. So while this doesn't come out often, every one of these cards has been important, kind of why I've narrowed them down to how I have. Golos is probably the least relevant of all of them, you know, but Cascading Cataracts is quite nice when playing with Nissa anyway. So, you know, overall I've kind of liked the feeling of this deck. You know, I'm going to try messing with the green-black Golgari version with Vraska and see how that kind of equates out. I don't know, because really Nissa can play a very important role in terms of being able to cast, you know, your flipped over Storm the Festivals and stuff, simply because you know, obviously lacking Nykthos, you need other ways to power out your mana, and this is definitely one of the ways. So we'll see how that toying with that goes, and then obviously we'll be doing this variant with the full best of, you know, 3 sideboard and such, just to give you some idea of how the deck fares in the current format without Nykthos and stuff. But, you know, this is one of the best decks in Pioneer, so I figured we'd give it a spin here in Explore. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what deck you might like to see play next in the Explorer format.